The wooden legs of my chair shrieked across the marble floor half a beat before my back hit nothing, just air, and then silence, the kind silence makes when 200 heads turn at once, as I went down hard with a water goblet bursting in my grip and raining glass into my palm. Standing over me, still buzzing from the fall, was my sister Delphine in her ivory gown with her hands locked around the chair she'd just ripped out from under me. "You don't belong at the family table," she spat. Beside her, our father Walter sat in his wheelchair and rang his good hand 3 hard times against the metal armrest. Across the room, her new husband Julian pushed up from his seat, his face gone pale under the chandeliers. "That's enough," he said. "Do you want me to tell everyone the truth?" Delphine went still, because the truth had been 6 weeks in the making, and it started in a speech therapy waiting room that smelled like old coffee and disinfectant. I was 39, running operations at a rehabilitation hospital, and every Tuesday I rolled my father to his appointments, while my mother Helen ran through her usual inventory of reasons why Delphine, 20 minutes late as always, earned patience, and I earned nothing. That evening, alone at my kitchen table with Dad's care log spread in front of me, something snagged my eye. A reimbursement check made out to Delphine for bathroom accessibility equipment I had already covered out of pocket, invoice sitting right there in the binder. And under it, a $4,000 charge under a merchant code that did not match anything remotely medical. I photographed the statement, slid the page into the binder I had started keeping since Dad's stroke, and drove to my parents' house to ask her in person. She crossed her arms and told me Dad knew she was just organizing things. My mother accused me of trying to take over the family, the way I always do. But my father, watching from his chair, lifted his hand and knocked 3 times against the side table. In his therapy shorthand, 3 knocks meant no. That night, alone in the apartment I had quietly rented 3 months earlier on my own salary, I punched the merchant code into a search bar. It did not belong to a pharmacy or a contractor. It belonged to the Windermere Grand Hotel. My father hadn't built anything. He had been billed for his daughter's wedding venue. I emailed Delphine calmly, asking for invoices tied to 3 specific withdrawals, and she called inside 5 minutes, indignant, demanding to know why I was auditing her. The next morning, she jumped ahead of me by firing off a cropped screenshot to the family group chat of a transfer, the exact amount I had personally fronted for Dad's wheelchair ramp, presented as proof that I was the real thief. My mother demanded an apology. I said nothing. I only attached the itemized receipt and Dad signed authorization for my reimbursement. The group went quiet, but the war had just begun. Days later, I arrived at my parents' house to drop off a prescription and found my door code no longer worked. A text from Delphine lit up my phone. She had stripped my caregiver app permissions to protect Dad from financial pressure, and the family had decided I should not be coming by anymore. I did not pound on the door. I screenshotted the lockout, called my father's room phone, and told him lightly I'd see him at therapy later in the week. He tapped the receiver twice. Acknowledged. That night, I signed the acceptance letter for the full operations manager promotion. I had delayed it for years to care for him, locked down my finances, shifted my emergency fund to a new bank, and started sketching a business plan for a consulting service to help families navigate stroke recovery logistics. I was quietly building a wholly independent life, and nobody in my family knew it existed. The following week, I carried my evidence binder into the office of Bianca Fontaine, an elder law attorney with a calm, expensive-looking practice downtown. She asked if my goal was control of my father's accounts or protection of my father. Period. I told her the truth. I didn't want a cent of his money, because taking control would only feed Delphine's story that I was the greedy sister. Bianca pulled Walter's actual power of attorney from the county database, strictly limited to medical and living expenses, with no gifting authority and mandatory record-keeping. Delphine had already violated it by stonewalling and accounting. Bianca laid the bathroom invoice next to the mystery hotel charge and circled both numbers in red. They matched exactly. We spread 18 months of statements across her desk, and the pattern opened up. Small test withdrawals more than a year ago, then a sudden spike 8 months back, right when Delphine posted her engagement ring online. Bianca fired off preservation notices to the bank, the hotel, and every vendor. Within days, a wedding planner's forwarded email proved my sister had personally directed vendors to use vague billing descriptions. She was not confused about boundaries. She was building a costume. My father's speech therapist Renata asked me to sit in on his session that Thursday. He was sharp, confirming dates, addresses, his own birthday, hemmed in only by a stroke that had stolen his ability to speak in full sentences, not his mind. The moment Renata brought up Delphine's wedding, he slammed his fist down 3 times, then tapped 2 words into his communication tablet. Private meeting. Renata told me quietly that he had been trying to signal the same thing for 3 weeks. 2 weeks before the ceremony, while Delphine was at her final dress fitting, I arranged for a private evaluation. Bianca, an independent psychiatrist and a notary, met my father in a conference room. He confirmed through his tablet that he had never approved a venue, an address, or any credit card payoffs, only nursing invoices. He also remembered giving Delphine a text authorization code, believing it was for his wheelchair ramp. In reality, it had made her an approved payer on his checking account. He signed a full revocation of her power of attorney, his hand shaking but the signature deliberate. My mother left a furious voicemail that evening, admitting on tape that she had known about the missing funds and that Delphine had always planned to repay it from her inheritance. An admission that they had been treating a living man as though his estate were already on the auction block. 4 days before the wedding, a bank fraud investigator called. 3 weeks earlier, Delphine had scheduled a $28,000 transfer to the Windermere Grand, timed to the final venue deadline, and our legal freeze had intercepted it before it cleared. Delphine called minutes later, sickly sweet at first, then panicked, demanding I recant to the fraud investigators and claiming the money was an early inheritance. I told her she had no legal authority left, and hung up. Bianca sent a formal settlement demand, full accounting, returned funds, restored access to our father, deadline Friday before the rehearsal dinner. Delphine answered with a text that I was a bitter, jealous woman trying to wreck her happiness. My mother offered a conditional truce. I could attend the wedding because the photographer needed a full family portrait, and Dad refused to wear his tuxedo unless I was there, but she warned me to keep my mouth shut and seated me near the kitchen doors. I almost declined until my Aunt Josephine sent a photo of my father's tablet reading, "Please come sit with me." That settled it. I locked my binder in Bianca's filing cabinet, arranged my own ride, brought no gift, and dropped my apartment key into my clutch as a reminder I had somewhere safe to go back to. The morning of the wedding, Julian called, tense, asking why our father's name was tangled in a billing dispute. I told him to ask his bride. He texted me a screenshot from the hotel's vendor portal, a massive balance due, a declined transaction, and Walter's name as the account holder. "Deline says your father gave us the money," he wrote. "The hotel says the payment was returned." Inside the Windermere Grand, chandeliers blazed over roses that stood in for physical therapy sessions my father would never get. My mother grabbed my wrist mid-reception, hissing for me to stay quiet. Julian kept refreshing his phone near the stage, jaw tight. When I confronted him quietly, he admitted Delphine swore the money was a gift. I told him then she had no reason to stop our father from confirming it himself. At the seating chart, I found my name exiled to the overflow table by the kitchen doors. But across the room, my father slammed his armrest 3 times, and Aunt Josephine flagged a staff member to bring a chair to the head table instead. Delphine intercepted me before I could sit, ordering me back to the corner, accusing me of trying to steal her spotlight. I told her calmly that Dad could answer for himself, and I reached for the chair just as she yanked it away. That was the fall. The crack of wood against marble. The goblet shattering. The silence of 200 guests. Dozens of phones already raised for the bridal toasts now capturing everything else instead. My father hammered his fist in that same unmistakable rhythm. "No, no, no." Julian overturned his own chair, stood up, and declared that was enough, asking his bride if she wanted him to tell everyone the truth. Security intercepted Delphine when she lunged for her father's tablet. Aunt Josephine set it down safely in his lap. Julian, voice stripped of its usual bravado, asked Walter directly if he had agreed to pay for the wedding. 3 knocks, then through the device. "No." Delphine spun on me, shrieking that I had trained a brain-damaged man like a circus animal, but I had never once touched the tablet, and my father kept typing. I understand. Delphine used my money, Aunt Josephine confirmed to the stunned room, and he understood every word. Cornered, Delphine finally cracked, screaming that the estate money would have been hers eventually anyway. Julian looked at his bride with open disgust, told the room the reception was over, and walked out without looking back. At urgent care, with glass being lifted out of my palm, I got a text from Bianca. The bank had found an external account in Delphine's name. The wedding had only been part of it. The forensic accounting finished weeks later revealed roughly $120,000 stolen over 18 months, funneled into credit card payoffs, vacations, and clothes, with my sister deliberately mislabeling transfers as caregiver reimbursements owed to me. A frame job. The login records and my hospital time cards destroyed it instantly, since the transfers had come from her IP address during hours I was clocked in at work. She had even tried logging in 3 times the night of the wedding to force the payment through. Cut off from money, she posted a tearful social media statement, blaming me. Instead, wedding guests posted their own raw footage of the chair, the tablet grab, her confession, and it spread fast. My mother showed up at my building, admitting she had known a small piece of the truth and rationalized it as an early inheritance. I told her dad was still alive and still needed that money to survive. The district attorney eventually charged Delphine with felony embezzlement, financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, and battery. Julian filed for divorce before spring, mailing me every email exchange he had had with hotel billing, along with a short apologetic note admitting he had ignored the warning signs because he wanted a beautiful wedding. Delphine swore she would fight the charges until the DA presented an overwhelming case, and she took a plea. Restitution that forced her to sell her car and drain her savings, surrender the refunded vendor deposits, and permanently forfeit any right to manage another person's finances. At sentencing, she cornered me in the hallway, begging me to tell the judge Dad had always meant to give her the money. I reminded her she had 6 weeks to come clean before she chose to pull a chair out from under me in front of 200 people. In court, I read a statement built entirely from words my father had chosen himself about the indignity of being silenced. And when I finished, his tablet spoke one line into the courtroom. Simone told the truth. Delphine got 3 years, 18 months active, the rest suspended, with mandatory restitution. My mother tried one last time on the courthouse steps, demanding I pay legal fees and write a forgiveness letter to the parole board. I told her forgiveness did not require erasing consequences or funding a disaster I had not caused, and walked away. Months later, I accepted my promotion to operations manager, and my side business, Anchor Point Consulting, took its first real client, a family untangling a medical trust for a relative who had lost her ability to speak. My father lives now in an assisted living apartment with wide windows and ferns we picked out together, choosing his own meals and his own schedule through his tablet. Small acts of everyday autonomy that once felt out of reach. My mother visits on Tuesdays with magazines and gossip, no longer holding any legal power over his life. And one quiet evening, sharing a meal at the second-hand table I had built myself, with Aunt Josephine pouring water and my father spelling out 3 words on a screen. This is family. My business phone rang. A stranger crying, saying her brother had just accused her of stealing from their father's care fund. I did not offer empty comfort. I pulled out a blank folder and told her to take a breath and tell me what records she already had. Because sometimes the hardest lesson is that being the strong one does not mean disappearing into everyone else's lies. It means documenting the truth until it cannot be denied. Take a moment to comment your city or country. I love connecting with you all. Thank you for listening and supporting, and be sure to subscribe for more stories. More are coming your way soon. Until next time, stay kind to yourself and stay strong.